Good morning to the Honorable Prime Minister of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, respective radio stations island-wide, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Sylvia Jacobs, to address you. Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to our colleagues here in Department of Communications, better known as CoM. Good morning to the members of media joining us here in the room and those who are joining us via social media. Good morning and a hearty, blessed day to all the people of St. Martin. It is an honor and pleasure for me to be here with you yet again for today, April 10th, as we endeavor to keep, as much as possible, the people of St. Martin abreast. I know that most of the ministers are issuing their press releases as much as they can, but I am here still to be able to answer any questions that the media may have. I do have one small update in terms of our trust fund. Steering committee is meeting this week in Washington at World Bank headquarters, and St. Martin is represented in this meeting with a mandate from the Council of Ministers by our steering committee member, Mr. Ronald Hullman. He is, of course, supported by a small delegation of the NRPB headed by Director Claret Connor. Usually I or other ministers join me as well at these meetings, but seeing the little bit of unknowing when the transition would happen, we opted to allow the steering committee member to do the 100% representation with the mandate as provided on the speaking points that were presented for the agenda of the meeting. The steering committee will receive an update on the ongoing projects and will give strategic direction on the trust fund portfolio. For St. Martin, the delegation will emphasize the continued commitment of the government of the St. Martin on all the trust fund projects. We want to see the results for the people of St. Martin with the intention that this fund was established, especially on the new projects for solid waste, wastewater, mental health, and housing. No project, as far as we are concerned, as St. Martin, can be taken off the table. Creative solutions must be found within the current closing date of the trust fund of 2028, which becomes, should it become a bottleneck. So anything that becomes a challenge, we have to find a solution forward, and we're willing to do that. The steering committee will also reflect back on 2023 and the results they achieved during that time. 2023 was a very fruitful year for the trust fund, with an additional $89.5 million approved for implementation and a disbursement of $79 million in project funds to St. Martin. As has been a consistent trend in the recent years, the St. Martin portfolio outperforms other countries within this region, which the bank manages, and globally in the execution of World Bank projects. So while the tempo and the pace may seem slow to us in their assessments and review, our portfolio, St. Martin's portfolio, outperforms the other regions in the other countries, in the region, as well as globally, that World Bank executes. This is a testament to the strength of our NRPB and our other project implementation units at the airport, at the hospital, the UNICEF NL, and the R4CR. In terms of our results, I was also very encouraged to receive the update of the Trust Fund Results Fair, which took place a few weeks ago right here on St. Martin at Sonesta Maho and was organized by the World Bank. And I also received a copy of the Trust Fund Annual Report for 2023. This report is available online for everyone to read at stmartinrecovery.org. I'll repeat, stmartinrecovery.org, which is the official website of the Trust Fund. I encourage everyone to check out this website and to learn more about World Bank, the NRPB, and the results that we have booked thus far with the Trust Fund. Just to mention a few of the many results achieved in 2023, the completion of the works to the airport departure hall, allowing for the reopening of the hall earlier this year, the opening of a new vascular lab, which allows St. Martin Medical Center to conduct the first shoulder replacement surgery on St. Martin in 2023, and the completion of repairs to 12 schools, allowing our children to learn in a safer environment, the installation of 9.2 kilometers of underground electrical cables, making the electricity network more resilient in case of a disaster, and the increased financial assistance to businesses. I'm most proud of this one because it is so tangible to the small businesses on St. Martin through the Enterprise Support Project, which thus far has supported 242 micro and small businesses, creating hundreds of jobs and support to civil society organizations through R4CR. This has already benefited some 52 civil service society organizations, CSOs, and 8,000 individuals on St. Martin. These for St. Martin are great results and cannot be overlooked. Of course, a lot of work remains to be done, and this is where the steering committee has an important role to play in this week's meetings. And so I'm in close contact with the delegation, and I look forward to receiving their report after the meetings have been finalized, so that I can also update the Council of Ministers as well as the people of St. Martin on any significant outcomes. I would like to take this time also, I don't know if I said it last week, but to convey our condolences on the passing of a teacher, former teacher at public school, teacher at USM, instructor at USM, comedian, cultural, I don't know what else to call her, but someone that is definitely left a legacy here on St. Martin, Dorothy Richardson, also known as Rosa in the comedic world, and we look forward to paying tribute to her in her wake in the coming week, as well as laying her to rest. Wishing the family, friends, loved ones, colleagues, students much strength, and of course to all those families out there who are suffering the loss or are still grieving the loss of a loved one, may God continue to strengthen you and give you the grace to continue on.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. We now move over to the question and answer session, and Jacqueline Hoffman of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolaika. Good morning, Prime Minister. Could you shed light on the situation at GB? Is it correct that the mechanics have laid down their work? And the current situation, does it also affect the cooperation with the French side regarding the water?
Yes, as it relates to GB, I'm also in constant contact with them, especially in terms of communication of the outages that were experienced over the weekend, which I know was very difficult for many of us. They have updated that they're using their Facebook pages, etc., to update, and other social media. I also encourage them to also look into, for instance, SMS via our telecommunications, and they are still finalizing that process, so that they have not finalized it as yet, but they are also looking into ways to expand the manner in which they communicate. What has taken place at the plant were due to challenges that they face, and whether mechanics have indeed done that, I have not received that report. Internal HR matters don't necessarily come up to the shareholder and our Council of Ministers directly, but I will inform or try to get that information to find out what may or may not be adding to the pressures and burdens with the when we have issues with the electrical supply from our power plant. So I can update that only when I get that information from GEBE, but I did forget to mention that I believe last week we were asked about, or maybe it was on the floor of Parliament, I get confused, forgive me, returning certain relief programs to GEBE, and indeed the senior relief program had already been approved to restart, and seniors are asked to visit the office from Friday, April 12th and Saturday, April 13th, as well as next Thursday, 18th, 19th, Friday the 19th and 20th, to register for that relief. So, of course, if you're unable to visit the offices, I would suggest that you give a power of attorney, a proof of life, and your, of course, address, IDs, etc., to a living relative who can then do the necessary back and forth movements for you. But at least I'm happy to announce that the Senior Relief Program for NGBE at NVEGEBE has been reinstated, and they are busy taking the registrations of our seniors this week from the 12th and 13th, and next week 18th to the 20th.
Sorry, the other part of the question, if the cooperation agreement with the French side regarding the water is affected by the situation at GB?
As far as I know, no. In fact, with that discussion for the water, we're also having discussions, and I do have a meeting next week, I forgot to mention, with our French counterparts, which would include the Prefet and President Mussington, so both the collectivité as well as the Prefet, to ensure we cover all bases. And I will be taking up the further discussions also as it relates to collaboration for electricity. So the water took place already, and we are working. This is one of the things that we hope to be able to collaborate on concretely moving forward. So that hasn't been affected. The water hasn't been affected, and we're looking to find solutions to share electricity as well.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Jacqueline. I would now like to invite Stephen Cerulean of PJD2 Radio. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Good morning to you, Prime Minister, and thank you for being here once again. Prime Minister, it's been advocated by the various political parties forming the government in The Hague that the CAS country should become an extraordinary province within the Kingdom of the Netherlands Antilles. I'm sure you have taken note of that report. What's your initial reaction?
I believe there is not one CAS country that would agree with that. And we have been, over the past 4 years, increasing our responsibilities, increasing our accountability for that responsibility. And I think most of us have grown in that respect. I know for sure St. Martin has grown in that respect, and we have increased our communication and collaboration with the Netherlands. So those parties that are talking about that surely do not understand the dynamic of the authorities of these individual countries within the kingdom, and ensuring our autonomy is something that we as CAS countries will continue to do. I don't see a change in that in the foreseeable future. And should the finalization of the new government bring such a wave of movement, then as countries we will have to collaborate to ensure that it does not damage the autonomy that we've gained thus far, as well as the collaboration. As a matter of fact, we are looking forward for a meeting on the 24th of April. And of course, with the transition, it is a matter of will I go or will another prime minister go, in order to sign a kingdom cooperation agreement, so that these three countries have more access to what I've mentioned here before, the growth fund, the SDE plus funds, and other funds that would help to build our resiliency, which the Netherlands sees it as important to support the countries with, not in a loan, but in direct financing. And that is not through a World Bank or anything else. So over the past 4 years, I have said that St. Martin is a place where dreams can be achieved and opportunities abound for our people. And with every agreement we sign, we see more opportunities for our people and remaining within this. In fact, growing our financial independence so that we can one day actually move toward independence. And I think that is a process we have to seriously discuss as countries.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Stephen. We now move on to the second round. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
Thank you. Prime Minister, recently, about 2 months ago, there was a Legionella detected at the Daily Herald, and all the water shut off for a few days to clean it out, which is very peculiar because it's a building where there's always people day and night, and a lot of water is used, especially for printing. So the question is, now that there's an ad placed whereby VSI is going to do, for the first time, I believe, check drinking water, tap water at different locations. Is there any information about, because it was detected by GB, and it's also a bit peculiar that inspectors of GB come to the Daily Herald to test water and then find Legionella. Is there Are there any reports about Legionella in the reservoirs of GB?
It's GB does testing at more than one location. I can tell you this for a fact. In my 20 years in education, on a weekly basis, they would go to all the schools to test water. They test water at their source, so what they send out, but of course it travels to the different homes, businesses, etc. through pipes. And so it's tested at the source and is good at the source. In fact, it was that good that the French side, with all their protocols, were able to connect to our pipes because, trust me, going through the European protocols is a lot. So our water passed all of those tests to be able to supply. So even with them in dire need of water, we still had to go through a rigorous process to be able to qualify to share water with them or to sell them water. So GEBE has their own lab technicians that check at various sites. I do not know outside of schools, because that was my experience, where else they do it, but I will follow up with them that the VSA ministry, in their responsibility for water, has taken up the, let's say, the mandate to go out and do inspections as well, is an added security. So I think it only shows the commitment to ensure that the water sent out to the population is as it left the source, so to speak. So I will follow up with the Ministry of VSA and GEB to ensure or get a clearer overview of how the inspections take place within GEBE, what they do on a regular basis, and how the Ministry of VSA will supplement that. But I do not have a report that this is a challenge across the board, and definitely not in our reservoirs. I have not received such a report. Let me just be very clear.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Prime Minister, taking into consideration the fact that you're preparing to leave office, is there this one thing in the pipeline that you would have loved to achieve that you did not? If yes, what is this one thing?
One thing would be, I can't give you one thing, Stephen, but I know for sure one of the things that is still pending, which can happen, or it might happen with the next government, is what was initiated in terms of the improvements for our civil servants. Requires legislation. As I mentioned before, it was at the Council of Advice, the main one for the changes, and I know everyone is asking, when will we finally see that increment on our salaries, the civil servants? So of course I'd like to have that finalized, and so we are looking forward. In fact, I got a message just last evening, this morning, where is it and how far and when do we expect this to happen? Of course, the legislation that requires to go to Parliament will have to go, but the other is national decree where general measures would then be signed off by governor and myself. If those are achieved before a new transition, I will be very happy. But even if it happens in the next government, I'm still happy, because it's a decision that, it's a process. It was taken in due time. I would like to see all of the other discussions that we had with our unions come to fruition, because government is on the same page with them in terms of improving the conditions for our civil service, not just in remuneration, but in working environment and the like. Another thing that has weighed heavily on me is, of course, the situation with the SER. And we are still trying to actively resolve the impasse because of the Employers Association, the dispute, and the ILO recommendations. Hopefully that will be resolved within the next couple of weeks, so that the necessary legislation that impacts St. Martin can be handled. That is something that has been pending now since last year, June. And despite our best efforts as government, a lot of times our passion to solve this problem has been used against us. And though we have positive verdicts in our court of law, an ILO recommendation still blocks a large segment of society, business representatives, from being a part of the SER. We are seeking a solution, and barring that solution being found, we will make do with what we have, because sitting in this function, I've realized that we have to take tough decisions in tough times, but we have to look at the greater good of the population, and hopefully the many egos that are impacted by the impasse, or that are causing the impasse, will reflect on this and see the greater good of our community in getting the SER up and running. A lot of what I have championed here, that growth fund, signing those agreements, because that was always said was a pipe dream and that we would never get access to those funds. Of course, I would like to be the signatory on those agreements, but as long as St. Martin can sign those agreements, then I am proud for St. Martin, because it's not about me. It's about the people of St. Martin. And when I move over 100% to the Parliament of St. Martin, I get to hold the government accountable for all those decisions that we made in the interest of the people of St. Martin and to ensure continuity. There is a lot of legislation that needs to be upgraded. And for me, those are the priorities that any government coming in will have to focus on, because government is continuity. And I want to ensure that the hardworking civil servants do not become disheartened and demotivated moving forward because of maybe a change in trajectory and a stagnation of progress that have finally been made.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. We now move on to the third and final round. Jacqueline, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roleika. Prime Minister, during the budget debates, it was revealed that some 350 building permits were issued in a year's time, but there was no mention of the civil works permit that has to be applied for in addition to the building permit for excavation and making roads or parking spaces, taking down trees and other civil works. Last year, it was announced that there was a 2023 budget, there were 24 civil works permits on a total of 300 building permits. How is it possible that building permits are issued without these permits for civil works?
That's a good question, which of course I will have to follow up with the Ministry of Romy on. I must say also a happy birthday to our Minister of Romy, who returned from his medical leave and is celebrating his birthday today. But I will definitely forward this information to the Ministry of Romy for response. In the budget meeting, they're talking the guilders and cents in terms of revenues for government and why having building permits approved on time ensures the income for government. The civil works permit, in terms of the technicality of when those are issued, I know that the ministry has put in place a more rigorous process so that they have pre-approved architects, so it doesn't take as long for the review of the actual building permits. And civil works depends on what type of work they are. So since I don't have the technical knowledge of these things, I don't want to go into it. But how that process rolls is something that I would allow the Minister of Romy via the ministry to give an answer to, and I'll pass it on to them.
Could we please get the information about the amount that is attached to it? Because each civil works permit costs 300 guilders. So that
in what sense? Please clarify.
There is a 6 weeks that people can object to the civil works permit being issued, and 150 has to be paid up front and 150 after. So it's for each civil works permit, it would be 300 guilders. So the total, if there's 300 building permits, logically there would be something like 300 civil works permits.
I can't say that that's a logical deduction because some projects are larger than others. Some take a longer time. So you get a permit now, you don't start. I know people who have gotten their permits that never started to build. So that could be part of the difference in terms of the civil works permit vis-a-vis the building permit. I really don't have the technical information on that. But hopefully those who are listening from the Ministry of Romy to your question understand it in its entirety. And if not, I will have them revert back to you in writing if it's unclear.
Stephen. Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen, you have the final question.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Prime Minister, earlier on you said that the incoming government will have quite some legislations to at least update. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? Is there any legislation in particular that you would love to at least see the incoming government taken under its wings almost immediately?
I would have to wait until the transition document is finalized to see what and where the legislation is, because some of it has already been initiated. Some of it is at the Council of Advice, has to come back to the Council of Ministers to then go to the governor to send on to Parliament for handling. So different legislation pieces are different processes. Some are LB-HUMs, so national decrees with general measures, which do not need to go to Parliament, and others might be shorter, possibly. So depending on what it is, some are at legal affairs, some are within the ministries themselves still being worked on. Some still need the start notizie to be finalized, which is the general statement by the ministry as to what they want to achieve with a particular piece of legislation. But we have a lot of legislations, as I'm sure you would remember our Minister of Justice saying, already in place, but not being enacted. Sometimes you have a legislation that needs further elucidation in a national decree or in a national decree with measures. And that is what is really taking the time. I think ensuring that we can get the people in place to assist with these legislations is a priority also. We started that process. We've gone out there. The Carriera Burst was successful, but will it yield the needed human resources to finish the work? I'm not sure. But definitely any legislation that, as I mentioned before, finalizes the process to improve the workings of government itself. All of those that are attached to the reform measures within tax reform, there are several that are in different stages of execution. I'm sure the Minister of Finance in his presentation in Parliament mentioned some of them, and we would want to see those tax reforms because we've been under a very archaic system. And of course, the digitalization of government. Some of the key back there, while you can instantly buy hardware, software, and start training people, our legislation also has to reflect that digital sharing of information is allowed. So those are, for me, priorities. The ones that affect the civil service, our service to the public, and of course, the reform measures at whichever stage they are. I would have personally wanted to spend more time on, of course, environmental issues, climate issues, ensuring that all of these points that we're working on are finished, but these are the areas that need continuous push. And so I'm hoping that the support or the passion that is within the ministry for these projects and for these legislations will be picked up by the incoming government. But they will hopefully be fully broken down within the transition document, which is being finalized, which I hope I will see next week.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Members of the media, this does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Any further questions can be sent to the Prime Minister's Cabinet in writing. Honorable Prime Minister of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. For rebroadcast, tune in to stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.